Forms are not useless, but the way you're doing them probably is. What's going on, guys? So where exactly do we want to put forms in the training curriculum if you practice them at all? So as a caveat, let me first put, I do not believe forms are mandatory, but I do believe they are useful. So I want to propose a paradigm for where we put the forms in the program. So let's use a parallel in strength and conditioning training. If you are training for strength and conditioning, there are several aspects, okay? Never mind the fact that you're going to have your various work sets depending on what kind of response you're going to modulate, the intensity, the volume, the exercise selection, and a few other variables. If you're going for strength, you fall into a certain range. If you're conditioning, you fall into another range. If you're going for hypertrophy, you go into another range. And there's a little bit of crossover between them, and there's interference between them. Needless to say, that's the biggest chunk of the problem. And what differentiates training from exercise is the fact that you have a goal that you are working towards. Whereas with exercise, it's just arbitrary. Movement for the sake of movement. So we have a few other things that go into a strength and conditioning program. All the rage right now is all sorts of prehab and rehab work, cool downs, stretches, mobility work, and all that stuff. And all that stuff may or may not have a place depending on your training philosophy. But there's one more aspect that we really need to look at, and that's the warm-ups. So there are general warm-ups and there are specific warm-ups. But warm-ups provide two very distinct attributes for your training. One, they do physically warm your body up. They, in other words, they prep your body for the work that is going to be done. Both general warm-ups and specific warm-ups are physically getting your blood flowing. They are ramping up your body temperature a little bit, lubing up your joints, activating your nervous system, getting all that work in, and that's great. But a specific warm-up is going to be practice for the movements that you will be doing, just at a much lower intensity and quite usually a much lower volume. And that right there is particularly about the nervous system, prepping the nervous system to handle the actual workload. And it allows you to practice and be mindful of all your cues, of all your internal monologue of what's going on and how you're feeling, what you're doing, and it allows you to tailor the workout to how your performance is going to be that day. This is precisely where forms fit in. Forms are often looked at as routinized shadow boxing, and that's really not a good way to look at them at all. For the most part, forms do not serve the same purpose as shadow boxing. They are often not done at the same intensity as shadow boxing, and they are quite often used to teach movements, whereas shadow boxing comes after you have learned the movements already. So forms already, if they are teaching movements, forms fall into the practice category. And because they are often done at sub-live speed, they would definitely fall into the warm-up, not the work category, because they're getting you reacquainted, refamiliarized with how you're moving that day, making sure that you have all your cues correct and all of that. But more than that, and this depends, system to system, but for the most part, forms kind of stem back to two concepts. One, forms go back to a concept of general conditioning. Thus why you see such exaggerated stances and oftentimes exaggerated handwork, exaggerated kicking and whatnot. It's literally for range of motion, conditioning, and all of that. And that's fine. But they often also contain many, many, many principles and are often denser than they appear on the surface. And it gives you a chance to become a little bit more mindful about your practice. And in that way, I believe that forms make you get into practice better the same way that specific warm-ups get you into your weight training session or your calisthenics session or whatever you're doing that day. They specifically turn on your nervous system and get you into your practice. And if we look at the SAID principle, specific adaptations to impose demands, our work sets always have to be a specific but submaximal variation of the actual work that we're intending to do. Martial arts, that is the fight. So in our case, we'd be looking at sparring, being actual work. And then you'd be looking at certain drills as very much assistance type work. So again, the forms would fall squarely within that warm-up session, fall into that piece of the puzzle. And for newbies who are learning the form brand new, who are learning the techniques, who are learning the moves, that's going to be their initial coaching sessions to teach them the moves in the first place. How better to teach the move than to have them do the moves, right? So thus the warm-ups and the coaching itself are often indistinguishable, and the warm-ups are often where you actually spend the bulk of your coaching time with the client in the first place. So more concisely, because I can ramble on all night, if you put your forms into the headspace of warm-ups, they are practice and warm-ups for you to get into your work sets. I believe that you will be paying them due justice. You will be getting into a better headspace of mindfulness for your movements, and you will, I believe, have a better responsiveness in your training when you get to your work sets. And again, let me repeat my caveat from the beginning. I do not believe that forms are absolutely necessary. But if you perform a style of martial arts that has forms, know where to put them, know where to stick them in the training so that you can maximize your training benefit and not waste a whole bunch of time doing unnecessary amounts of warm-up and assistance work and forgetting the actual work. Guess that's all I got for you. Till next time, good journey.